What's up, guys? LQ here with the LQ Review. Thank you so much for joining me right here at my YouTube channel. This is where we talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff that we love to talk about. Movies, video games, comic books, and TV shows. And right now, I'm going to give you guys, yeah, I know it's been out for a while, but I haven't talked about it yet. I'm going to talk about James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. And this is unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Nobody went to see this movie. It's unfortunate that this movie did not have a bigger audience because it was great. This was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. It brought now this is also going to be this is not a movie that anybody's going to be lukewarm on. This is going to be the type of movie where either you like this type of movie and you love it, or you don't like this type of movie and you hate it. And I can see either side. This is not a movie that was made for everybody. This movie is made for people with certain sensibilities as far as what they enjoy, the kind of comedy that they enjoy, the kind of action that they enjoy, the kind of irreverence that they do or do not enjoy. How much they're willing to suspend their disbelief while watching a film. A lot of that is dependent on your enjoyment of this movie. This is through and through a James Gunn film. And James Gunn is not for everybody. So if you're somebody who says, I love the Suicide Squad, then I get it. I loved it too. But if you're somebody who says, man, I did not like that movie, I get that too. I get that too, because this movie's not for everybody. But I loved it. I loved it. Let's talk about some of the things that I loved. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, phenomenal. I love her in this role, and I loved this interpretation of Harley Quinn. Every time that she's been on screen, it's been a little different. The first Suicide Squad, she was definitely one of the bright points of that film. Birds of Prey, she was different in that film. Now, I'm one of the people that liked Birds of Prey. I didn't love it, but I liked it. But she was very different in that film from the way she was portrayed in Suicide Squad. Now, in this film, I would say it's a little more towards in line of the first Suicide Squad movie, but her interpretation definitely had James Gunn's fingers all over it. She was very irreverent in this, and kind of a loose cannon, very funny, but I really enjoyed Margot Robbie's interpretation of Harley Quinn here. It was probably my favorite Harley Quinn performance by Margot Robbie thus far. Idris Elba as Bloodsport, phenomenal. Clearly they can deny it all they want. Clearly this was originally written to be Deadshot's role. And I'm glad that they didn't just recast Deadshot, because I'd like to see Will Smith come back to the DCEU at some point as Deadshot. I think that he was also one of the strong points of that first Suicide Squad movie. So I'd like to see him return as Deadshot eventually. So I'm happy with the fact that they brought in Idris Elba as Bloodsport, and I thought that he knocked it out of the park. Bloodsport is not a very well-known character in the DC universe. Unless you're somebody who's really read the Superman comics, you probably don't know who Bloodsport is. And there's been multiple versions of Bloodsport over the years. This is an interpretation of the first Bloodsport, and that first appeared in, what was it, Superman number 2, Superman Volume 2, number 2, I believe. And he shot Superman with a kryptonite bullet. Like I said, Bloodsport has changed over the years to event. He, for most of the '90s, he was this white supremacist character, which had its own interesting stories to tell. But this interpretation of Bloodsport was definitely one that I enjoyed. And I thought that Idris Elba just knocked it out of the park. And I really hope we see this character back, because it was very well done. Polka Dot Man. How much fun was Polka Dot Man? I loved his arc in this movie. Coming to terms with his villainhood, coming to terms with the abuse that he suffered at the hands of his mother, ending up being a superhero. It was an ill-fated journey, but Polka Dot Man was definitely one of the highlights of this story. Let's see. King Shark was hilarious. Any chance to have Sylvester Stallone voice a man-eating character, I guess I'm going to take it from here on out because it was so much fun. Now, being completely honest with you guys, I do prefer the King Shark from the Harley Quinn animated series. I think that King Shark is a more well-rounded character and more interesting of a character. But James Gunn's version of King Shark definitely had its own endearment to it. You know, I was definitely endeared to the character by the end. Ratcatcher 2. Ratcatcher 2 was the heart of this film. Ratcatcher 2 was my favorite character. And I did not expect that going in. I did not expect that going in. I really expected Margot Robbie, Idris Elba, or John Cena to be my favorite character. And for me, it was Ratcatcher 2. She was just the heart of the film. And I love the sequence at the end. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of Starro being taken out by hordes of rats. I love that sequence at the end. Her flashback to her father and kind of wrapping the movie up in a bow with the messaging that everybody's important. Man, I just loved it. I thought that last scene with Ratcatcher was phenomenal. Loved it. All right, let's talk about a character or two. Let's talk about two characters that I'm mixed on. I was definitely mixed on Peacemaker. I liked where they were going with the character initially, and then I did not necessarily like his climax. I don't necessarily like the way that they ended his story. Um, he ended up being definitely more of an antagonist than a protagonist, and I would have just rather seen him. I don't know. Knowing that there's a Peacemaker show coming out and knowing that it takes place after this, I was really hoping to get more of a protagonist character out of him. By the end of the movie, I hated him. I hated him, and that's probably by design. I think that's what James Gunn wanted us to do. But knowing that we're going to be spending more time with this guy, I really wanted to like him more than I did. So I was very mixed on him. I liked a lot of the decisions they made with him. I like a lot of what John Cena brought to it, but I did not like the way that they concluded his storyline in this movie. I was a little mixed on Starro as well. Starro is obviously, as somebody who collects comics, I've spent time with Starro in the comic book world, and I thought that James Gunn did Starro justice in more ways than not. I didn't like the fact that getting the Starro parasite on your face, I didn't like the fact that was a death sentence. Because that means that if Starro ever does come back in the DCU, which, let's face it, he's probably not going to, but if he ever does come back in the DCU, we're not going to get scenarios where, like, I've read comic books where Starro takes over the Justice League. And that would make for some interesting storytelling. But now that Starro is an automatic death sentence, that's going to limit the people that Starro can take over to either villains or nameless characters. And I think that there would be a lot more interesting storytelling in the future to happen if he were to, take over Superman. What kind of storyline would that be? I think that'd be interesting. So, I don't know. I was mixed on Starro. All right, let's talk about some of the stuff I didn't care for. I did not think this was a very good interpretation of Amanda Waller. I feel that her getting owned by her employees at the end, I feel like that was not a good decision to make for Waller. And even if that were to happen, knowing Amanda Waller the way that I know her from the comics, those people would not be around much longer. They would not be around to carry on this Peacemaker mission. They'd disappear. They'd disappear. And I feel like Amanda Waller just kind of let them off the hook. That's not Waller. That's not Waller. So I did not like the way that Amanda Waller's character played out in this. I don't really have a lot of complaints about this movie, though. I really liked it. I really liked it a lot. I thought it was extremely well done, very funny, very irreverent, and it definitely brought the gore. It brought the violence, stuff that you'd kind of want to see in a Suicide Squad movie. Now, I'm always somebody who says Whenever somebody says, I want to see a rated R Batman, I want to see a rated R Superman, I want to see rated R comic book movies, I'm always the guy that says, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. They don't need to be rated R. They don't need to be rated R. I've got thousands of comics on this wall here. Most of the DC comics, most of the Marvel comics, they don't call for an R rating. Now, I've got some Black Label stuff over there. Sure, that stuff's R rated. But most of the stuff in the general canon does not need to be R rated. None of that calls for an R rating. None of that cannot be done in a PG-13, or none of it, all of it can be done in a PG-13 rating. All of it. Maybe not the Black Label stuff, but all the rest can be. Suicide Squad did not need to be rated R. It limits the audience. It limits the audience. It limits the number of people that can go see the movie. Which, let's see. Let's do a head count here. Birds of Prey, rated R. Nobody went to see it. The Suicide Squad, rated R. Nobody went to see it. So far, the DCU's track record with rated R movies is not very good. Now, the Joker was rated R, and the Joker everybody went to see, but let's be real here. The Joker was a phenomenal film that was... It put itself in a scenario where people who normally don't go see comic book movies went to see it, because it was seen as a high art film. Whether that's true or not is debatable, but let's face it, it got nominated for Best Picture, so the Joker is a little bit of a different beast. I really think the R rating in comic book movies limits the audience. For every Deadpool that you have, an R-rated comic book movie that's successful, you've got 4 or 5 R-rated comic book movies that are not successful, because it limits the audience. So I don't think they need to be R-rated moving forward. I hope the DCU is not R-rated moving forward. But that being said, it worked in this movie. I really like the Suicide Squad. I liked it a lot. I give it an A-. I just thought it was one of James Gunn's better works, and it definitely is through and through a James Gunn film. And you're gonna either like it or you're gonna hate it. And I liked it. So that's my take on the Suicide Squad. What did you think? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love for you to share with me what you thought, especially if you're somebody who has read the Suicide Squad comics and can really relate to the type of story they were telling here from that perspective. I'd love to hear anybody's perspective, but definitely if you've read the comics, I'd love to hear your take on it. While you're down there commenting, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I put out a lot of content, want to make sure that you're up to date with everything that I'm doing. And as always, thank you so much for joining me right here at the LQ Review.